Hi, it's Jesse Perlman, and in this segment, I'm going back to the basics. This is by request by a couple of subscribers that I have, Jason and Aaron. Thank you for giving me a little bit of focus. Most of my other stuff is pretty theoretical. I haven't gotten down to really the basics of how you start doing things. So this is all about agile planning. Before we can do anything in life, before we can really commit to anything in life, we kind of have to have a clear plan for what we're going to be doing in it. And there are, all right, I forgot I wrote this down, and this is my prompt. This is to remind me to get going on the subject, because Agile planning answers the question so often asked back in the 90s and early 2000s, when the concept of a stable career within one company had not yet completely just disintegrated. So the question is where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Agile planning answers that. If we think about it this way, I really can't think beyond 5 years cohesively. To go beyond 5 years cohesively is pushing credulity. It really is. I mean, just think back 5 years ago from today. It's a different world. And the plans you may have laid 5 years ago may have been altered significantly in that time, but your vision, the thing that is driving your behaviors, and I have to remember that this is the hand I have to keep below my face because of the shadow it'll create. However, the vision, the thing that gives you the impetus to continue forward in the path, regardless of the obstacles that you run into, continuing to try and execute that plan, has remained unaltered. But you've had to make changes along the way because there are obstacles that can occur, either in the environment itself or otherwise. So again, we're starting to see this as a one-to-many kind of perspective. I can relate it to you as an individual. If I can relate it to you as an individual, you as an individual can then start to apply it in its broader scope to an organization, because it's practical to your experience and therefore almost anyone's experience, right? This is really the goal in whatever we do, is to get it so that it's easily transmittable in nature. So dialing it back again, where do you see yourself in 5 years? How do we do this? So you heard me say vision, and I'm going to start writing on the whiteboard at this point. So at the highest level of planning, we're talking about 3 to 5 years, and that's called the visionary layer. That's the vision that you're trying to accomplish. Now, a vision can extend beyond 5 years, but again, we go back to what is practically or pragmatically plannable for that scope of time. And you'd be surprised, there's a lot of things that you can do, but your actual control at that level is questionable unless you have pretty tight processes at the lower levels. So if we understand that the 3 to 5 year scope, right, this highest level, 3 to 5 years, and all this will be cleaned up and dropped down there, because this is a wonderful, in its base state, folks, this is a map. This is a way that you can start to bring alignment to your organization and coordination around the various layers of planning that you do. And what are those necessary checkpoints that you need to put in place to ensure that each layer is getting its appropriate feedback and direction from the layer above and below? So there's this other thing that's going on, which I call a balanced agile planning intake and delivery cycle, or series of cycles, which we'll see at play. But you have to be able to understand that at these different layers, there's different ways of planning for it. So this is pretty complex, even though this is the basics. So we're going to start with the very basics. So the highest level of planning is called visionary. So I'm going to put this over here, and that's 3 to 5 years. And I'm going to write it down, visionary. All right, the next layer down, once we have a vision, is the one that we're going to call something that we can execute in what we call 2 to 8 quarters, right? So roughly in 6 months to 2 years, what can I execute as a series of strategies that are going to align to that visionary level of 3 to 5 years? So this is just behind it, right? So we call this the roadmap, the strategic roadmap. So I'm going to write that here. This is the roadmap layer. Now, I'm writing them off to the side because this is part of the state mapping I was talking about, and this is going to make more sense in just a bit. Here is really our area of focus right now. So we've got the visionary layer, which is 3 to 5 years. We're planning 3 to 5 years. Where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years? 2 to 8 quarters. How am I going to get there strategically? So if I have a goal in 5 years of running a highly successful consulting business in 3 to 5 years. In the 5th year, what is that really driving vision that I know I can create a reality around? And let's say that in 5 years, I happen to have a brick and mortar office with 25 consultants under my hire who I co-collaborate with, and we're executing against agile behaviors across broad industries, and not just for transformation, but for stabilization, education purposes. And it's not just from software delivery, but it would be from a series of other areas as well. Dispersed coaching, success organizations, marketing, whatever the case might be. Because as you're starting to pick up, Agile is applicable beyond software development. And if it works at a level of one, it works at a level to many. So if in 5 years, that is my achievable goal, what is that roadmap to get there in the next 6 months to 2 years? So in here, there's a body of work that I'm going to start breaking down into executable pieces. So let's just say at the smallest level in that 2-month time frame, what I need to start doing is, if this is my vision, right? Brick and mortar boutique consulting firm that does, bespoke consulting services, agile bespoke consulting services, ABC. We'll just call it ABC. So my vision, here we go. We're doing it on the fly, people. My vision is ABC, agile boutique consulting. So what are the things I need to do? Well, I happen to have one, whatever we want to call it, and in SAFe it's called an Epoch. In other places, it's a strategic initiative. And classic waterfall, it's a project. But it's something that's got kind of a clear understanding of when we want to start, a clear understanding of when we want to start, and a clear understanding of when we want to finish. So there's got to be a measurable scope of what we're doing over that period of time. So in a 2-month period of time for ABC, one of the first things they need to execute is marketing, right? So in here, there's got to be their intro marketing, whatever we want to call this body of work. For the sake of consistency, I'm just going to call it an epic. So we're going to call it the intro marketing epic, and that's going to be, and I'm going to say in 2 months, they're going to be able to execute this IME. Right, this intro to marketing expert, because what this does is lays the groundwork of who we are, what we do. We start building a body of consulting. However, there's a longer term epic that's going to be running that maybe starts around the same time, but it's going to finish maybe in 18 months. Now that epic is large in nature. There's a lot of things that go into it, but what that is actually building out our consultancy around different areas, say, or finding a large client that can bring us the financial stability to grow the rest of the roadmap. So there's a lot of different things in there. So we're just going to say a very large epic, right? So I have a very small epic and a very large epic. 2 months, 2 years. Both of them aligned to getting ABC recognition in the market and that clientele base that'll launch their further success to be able to continue helping other organizations be successful in their market. So as we go down then, sorry for the clunk, folks. So as we go down, we've got visionary, strategic roadmap, which we're just going to call roadmap, make it easier for me. And then we go down one more level. Now that next level down is the level that we start getting into that we call, it could be called a release boundary. It could be called a program increment using SAFe terminology. It could be called planning by some. There's a variety of ways. Big room planning is another one. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with big room planning because I love its little. Well, no, I'm not going to stick with big room planning. Look, it's 1 to 3 months. All right. So in 1 to 3 months, notice how we keep narrowing the scope. Very long term. Executionable pieces on the midterm. What are we really focusing on that is going to deliver value on the near term that's building that stepping stones or pathway to, again, either one of these epics, that little epic or that big epic. So here we call that, in classic terms, it was called a release, right? When do we deliver value? At the end of every release. Blah, off it goes. Well, with the way Agile software development has disrupted everything, and now we're into continuous delivery cycles where, Google's doing ridiculous things like 20 releases a second at times. It's just insane what can happen when you have highly integrated, successful processes, right? Agile processes. So we talk about we develop on a cadence, right? And we deliver on a demand. So we want to put a time box around something, this planning boundary, and that's all these really are these planning boundaries. When is the start of it? When is the stop of it? What do we expect to do at the beginning? Where do we expect to be at the end of that period of time? That's all we're trying to do. As we get here, it's far more actionable. It's far more it's shorter from idea to execution. So you're able to see what it is that you're doing. This is where you're starting to actually deliver the value, right? Those larger pieces of value in a closer period of time. And then below that is what you actually do every day to get you there, or every couple of weeks. So in the 1 to 3 months, I'm struggling, and I continue to talk about this because I don't know a good term for it. And I'm hoping I can come up with one while I continue to talk about what this is. And I don't know. There's going to be some editing that may occur here. It's really stumping me. I don't want to call it a release. I don't want to call it a PI. I don't want to stay within too safe a specific. A program is a specific way of thinking about how we align work from large software development. There's a program that you're delivering against that ties into maybe a larger product or portfolio of work, or a series of other connected strategic roadmaps, right? That are all aligned to a larger set of visions and strategies that are trying to impact, global behaviors. This is all scalable and it's all doable, but these are the chunks in which it's done. So when you get here, this is kind of the pivot point. This is where you're proving out whether you're actually capable of delivering all the value you're talking about wanting to deliver to make the money that you want to make. Can you do it right here? So I'm going to call this I'm just going to stick with, no, I can't call it that because honestly, it is not a release. I'm going to call it a PI. I'm just going to stick with what SAFe has done to us, right? So I'm going to call it a PI, just like Google has, become a word. SAFe has put certain words in place that have just become institutionalized, and it's hard to argue with them. So I'm going to call this a PI until I come up with something else. And maybe in the course of this video, I will come up with something else that I'm happier with. As you can see, I'm trying to find as agnostic a way of delivering this information as possible, because what I truly believe Agile provides us is a way of consciously evolving our processes and behaviors so that we are living and executing in a way that best serves us for the intent that we have for ourselves or our organization. And to do so, it's really hard to do it just like everybody else is doing it, because yours is rather explicit and clear. Now, you can use elements from those frameworks. I'm not saying the frameworks are bad. I'm saying the frameworks are like Legos or an erector set. Take what you want from it, attach it in the way that is best suited to you, so long as it is clear in its usage and you hit the key ceremonies that are being asked of you, right? And those key ceremonies in Agile are what? Clear time boxes, self-organizing teams, which means they're empowered and they have free information, transparent culture, right? And Are you inspecting and adapting on a regular basis? Are you getting your feedback? Are you listening to both internal and external feedback sources so that you are delivering the right thing at the right time and making sure that the vision you originally have is actually a viable vision? Because sometimes when you start your research process, that which you think you understand the problem to be is not really what the problem is. And if you're acute enough, you can then morph what you thought the answer was into what the answer they're asking you for is. Still finding a vision and giving a solution. It's just not the one that you were expecting to find, which is sometimes the better one to have. All right, soapbox off. All that because I couldn't really think, or I was unwilling to just submit to PI. But you're going to start thinking about that 1 to 3. You're going to remember what this is, because this is the linchpin. This is the cog. This is what the coordinating layer really focuses on. This is where the rubber meets the road, because this is the value that you're trying to deliver to your market every 1 to 3 months. That's what it's called. It's the value delivery. I knew I would find an answer. So I'm going to call it PIVD. Oh, no. No, I can't call it that. Delivered value, DV. Delivered value. We're just going to call this the DV. Yeah, I'm getting rid of the PI. So sorry. I win. You know, I knew this answer from my other body of work. I just hadn't thought to apply it right there. So this is the DV. This is the actual delivered value. This is where you get to measure it best. That which is being put into the market at the feature set level. So this is actually called the feature level. That's another way of calling it. So visionary roadmap, I'm going to call this feature for the purpose of our mapping. All right. The roadmap I called Epoch. We may come back to that. We may change that language. But now we have visionary roadmap and feature. 3 to 5, 2 to 8, 1 to 3. So ABC, the Agile Boutique Company, is looking to do some blast marketing and really drum up some business, get some excitement going in the market space for themselves. Excuse me, some tea now. So in this space, there's got to be some features that we're delivering for this market value, which has got to be delivered within two quarters, which is 6 months, right? So I've got 2 feature periods or 2 delivering of value periods to execute on whatever that might be. So maybe in here there's going to be 1 feature that's a small feature. It's easy to execute on this. We're going to do some guerrilla marketing. So that small feature says we've got to put some plans in place. We've got to build our content, our materials. We've got to pick the location. So there's a body of work that we're going to break down over the next course of weeks so that we can take daily action on. So now we're starting to see how this funnel really breaks everything down. As I was talking about in my last video about achieving organizational objectivity, that funnel that gets shaped when we do this kind of exercise every time. So I've got the small feature that's there to do the guerrilla marketing, and then I'm landing clients. So I've got to do some heavy prospecting, right? I've got to do so I'm going to do some networking events. We're going to put together some networking events. All right. So I've got a larger feature, right? A larger feature that I'm going to accomplish at the end of that 3, whatever it is. If I do this all in 1 month, think about that. All right. We always have the shorter side of the planning cycle. Right? The 3 years, the 2 quarters, the 1 month, the 2 weeks, there's only 1 day. I don't want to break it down any more than that, even though we talk about there's only 6 effective hours in a day for somebody to deliver content or value around. So think about that. But anyway, if I put everything on the shorter cycle, I have to be faster in my responses, right? So I have to have a well-oiled machine. That's the performant end of the scale. And that's what we aim towards is getting everything down into a kind of standard consumable size where we can, so that we can really get to that median value of what delivery times we have through this cycle. And if we're I know in 3 months I can deliver 6 small features, and those small features can add up to 1/2 of a full epic that can be delivered in 6 months, then I know I can hit the market with this brand new Yowza, whatever it might be, quickly. And that's faster than studies have shown my competitors might be. So this is really the value of agile planning and understanding the full context of how this works. So I've got the vision, I've got the strategic roadmap that we break down into those executionable pieces that we're going to continue to call epics at this point, because why not? Then we got, because I win with delivered value, we come down into 1 to 3 months, right, for those features that we're delivering that go back into that strategic roadmap, those epics that are saying this is the value that we expect to deliver the vision against. So the delivered value then gets broken down into the real executionable piece. So if this is the coordinating layer, remember there are 3 levels of every organization. There's a strategic, there's a coordinating, and there's an execution. So when we think about that body of work, again, we come back to that funnel from organizational objectivity. That funnel always gets shaped. When that funnel always gets shaped, you can't help but start to understand that it's an upside down pyramid. The concepts are grand. It rests on a smaller body in order to execute it, and it's balanced on the teams that are doing the work daily. And this is where we have to be very, 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 very careful in understanding that the predictability we allow them, all right, the culture that is created in an organization is what drives the ability to balance all of this. Now, I'm going to do another video about balance, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I used to do a lot of balancing as a young man, so I've got to get back in shape, because I will be actually balancing objects to explain what business agility is and lean adoption of behaviors means when you're trying to influence a market, or respond to a market, or enter a market. So, teaser. Anyway, as we come down here, now we get into the repeatable process level of Scrum, right? Every 2 to 4 weeks. This is where we start getting into, and this is an established term from software development, stories. Because we start to understand that humans resonate best with a story. A story tells us the value in a way that makes us feel something while also making us think about it critically. So it does 2 purposes. It does the best purpose possible. It aligns those 2 sets of decision making that we have, intellectual or emotional, into the holistic one that best serves us from an objective perspective of this is really going to work or it's not. So when we talk about the stories, let's say we've got that small feature, and I've got to come down to this next layer, and I forget what color. I'm using green for this one. So I'm just going to put an S for that. And stories are stories. Now the thing about a user story is it shouldn't be something bigger than a couple of 3 days to execute on, right? If I have only 2 to 4 weeks in which to execute a body of work, I have to think about how am I managing that time best. And those stories, once again, 2 to 3 days, right? 1 day is perfectly acceptable as well. That's a very small story, perfectly acceptable. 5 days, kind of pushing it. If one story takes half of the least amount of time available for planning and executing, if that goes wrong, it's going to leave a big mess, and it might consume at least half of the remaining velocity that you were using somewhere else to clean up the mess. So you have to think about those things. So story 2 to 3 days, right? The feature level, this is, a couple of weeks, right? So if I've got, again, 1 month to 3 months, probably nothing bigger than 6 weeks, nothing, certainly 1 week. If I can deliver it if I can deliver it in a sprint, if I can deliver it in the 2 to 4 week time frame, guess what? It shouldn't be up here to begin with. And if it shouldn't be up here to begin with, and if it's down here, I'm pretty sure there's something that it could be tied to back up in here that's going to be valuable. And if it can't be, it shouldn't be in there. That's part of the planning process, right? That ability to sift through that which are the wheat from the chaff. No good. Don't do any work on that. That will net no value to us. There's no nutrition in that activity. And all work that your organization is doing should be planned work that is aligned back up to the highest level. So as we come down into the story level for the Agile boutique consulting, if we have that small feature of guerrilla marketing, one of the stories has to be site research. Somebody's got to go find that. And we've got 2 days to go find a good location. We have to think about Who is the clientele that we're aiming at in order for that site to be effective? Right? So that's one way of breaking it down. So now, what are the tasks? So now we get down to the lowest level, but before I do that, I got to write that over here, story. Right? I'm really excited about this. This is the thing that really inspired me to do this video today, is this piece right here. I'm so happy about it. So story, all right. 3 to 5 years, visionary. 2 to 8 quarters, roadmap. 1 to 3 months, feature. 2 to 4 weeks, story or sprint. You know what? I'm going to change it because we're planning for the event, not for the object. So this is me correcting myself on the fly because we plan work against time, all right? But we have to understand what we plan that time for. So, oh crap, right. I'm just going to call it delivery, right? We can deliver at any point in here. So for that planning period, we can deliver at any point in there. We'll just call it delivery. So much better. Oh, you guys have no understanding what just happened in my head. Not just untied. I got to get the right colors in the right places. So this becomes a D, and this is delivery. Right? This is the sprint. And that's 2 to 4 weeks. So roadmap 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5, visionary 3 to 5, roadmap 2 to 8 quarters, delivery 1 to 3 months, sprint 2 to 4 weeks, and then daily is what? Well, daily is daily. It's the foundation. It's the root of all. So daily stays daily. Now that's why I always represent daily in black. It's the grounding element of your organization. We tend to forget this. A question I am often asked is, how do you drive predictability in an organization at scale? I think the expectation of my answer is always that I should be speaking up here. But I always talk to right here. Because if you're not predictable at the lowest level of your team, at your organization, which is the team level, not the individual, by the way. All right. Individuals are components within a team, and component is a horrible term, but these are individuals who are working together. They're interlinking in such a way as to deliver a body of value from their collected skill set. All right. So you want to make sure that you have as much diversity of skill set in each team so that they're capable of accomplishing as much by themselves as possible without any dependencies outside of themselves, so that they're as effective as they can be and get as performant as they can. Because if at the lowest level of execution, every day I've got to run 10 miles and I have to wait 5 hours before I can start, because I'm waiting for the rest of my team to collect, or I'm waiting for somebody to show up finally with the gun, I've got to run like hell, and I probably won't make those 10 miles in a way that is going to be best for me, right? However, if every day I show up to run that 10 miles and everything is needed at the right time, and the gun, and bang, off we go, I can do that 10 miles in a regimented fashion very well. And then over time, I can improve my performance within that 10 miles as I choose to use it based on my desire of how much I want to put out. Now, most organizations should be running at 80%. At all levels, they should be running at 80%. Why? It gives 20% to respond with. Right? I don't drive my car flat out all the time. I don't go redline. I talked about this in organizational objectivity, and we're going to get into some of the 3 stuff as well, but I don't redline my vehicle unless it's absolutely critical, because redlining the vehicle can destroy it. So running your delivery organization as fast and as hard as you can at all times is really rattling your machine apart. So 80% allows for that that elasticity in the process to ensure that you're capable of leaning in when necessary and backing off when you need to take a break, so that the team can recover and ensure that they're always delivering that roughly 80% capacity or velocity of total value. Right? And then there are things that you do to play around with. What are your theoretical end limits for your teams based on various levels of planning that you're doing and execution that you're doing? So I always talk about what are you doing down at the daily level to the sprint time box. That's it. That's all I care about. Where's your productivity? How much work are you putting on people every day? Is that an appropriate load? Because if I have a body of work of 10 things, I should probably only be doing what according to Big Three? 3 of those things at any given time. And if they're very complex, quite frankly, 1 at a time is always best, because multitasking is a lie. So down at the lowest level, we start talking about tasks. See, you thought I was way over and then I just came running right back with it. So down at the lowest level is the task. So I'm just going to put a T there. But you notice I'm going to put it over here. Why? Because the tasks are kind of different than everything else. This is the executionable piece. Everything we wish to achieve aspirationally is made actionable daily. Everything we wish to achieve aspirationally is made actionable daily. That which I measure in time, in broad swaths of time, I don't necessarily calculate as time when I measure its effort. All of these things, I measure their effort in abstracts so that I'm not trying to be precisely wrong. And we'll get into this as we talk more about planning in greater detail. So there's a variety of things that we do. We can use points. We can use what's called relative sizing, which is t-shirt sizing, which is saying simply, is this object as big as that? And I'll give you a graphic representation of that in a minute, because once I get done talking about what all of this does, I will talk about how you do it in each one of these layers. This is going to be a stonking long video, and I may edit it into multiple parts. We'll see. That's what I love about editing. Some stuff stays in because I found it funny. Some stuff just goes because it should go. Anyway, the classical music's not doing it for me. So we measure these in abstracts. But down here, when we talk about the task, we estimate in the actual hours we think it's going to take. Now, careful, Jesse, you just said estimate actual hours. When I talk about actual hours, I'm talking about the time in which it's going to take to do the work, not the actual hours, which is the time it actually took to do the work. Take versus took. Estimated is take, actual is took. And for purposes of aligning or understanding budgets and where your spends are, you want to know the actuals of things to a certain degree. The estimates are there in the beginning. You may want to compare them against actuals to see if the team's got a good sense of their estimating capabilities, and then forget about actuals. There's a whole bunch of theory around budgeting that's out there now. Lean budgeting, beyond budgeting. It's actually big in Europe, starting to resonate strongly that funding traditionally was occurring at this kind of level. And now we're talking about pushing funding down even further and trusting that if we're clear about the visions that we want to execute, those with the best ability to execute, most aligned to it, will have the money to do so. It's not competitive. It's not competitive. The organization sets it up. So these are highly efficient streams of delivery aligned to this, and they trust that the money these streams are asking for is going to be well spent. Again, further empowering, right? Further empowering. Decentralized decision making, big and agile, what I call leadership at every level. Right? If you take the money out of here and you push it down here, you're really decentralizing things, because now you're talking about the people who are talking about the practical features by which you deliver something. Let's take a step back from the theoretical ABC. Let's talk about a vehicle itself, a car. In a car, there are a series of features that you may want to deliver. One of them is the ability to drive autonomously. There's a large series of work against several different streams of effort that will go into it. And if you turn the funding over down into the feature layer that says, here, you know best how to execute this strategy in the right time frame because you're the best feedback layer, and I'll talk about that later as well. You're the best feedback layer, you should have the money by which to do so. So if you say that in autonomous driving, our research has proven that a mellow voice preparing us for the events that are about to come, whether it is standard driving, we'll be taking a right turn in the next quarter mile, Jesse, or critical, Jesse, there is an accident ahead, prepare for harsh braking. If we have a calm and confident voice, that's what we need. So let's find voice actors and let's start building that feature set, and that's going to cost us this much based on our research. So they have the ability to pull that funding from their layer because they've proven that there's value in it via the research, right? So we maintain that ability. What SAFE calls, you maintain variability in your process until you find the right solution. And that's what research is all about, maintaining variability. And there's a lot of it that goes on. Again, I'm kind of getting ahead of the cart as so that the horse could run me over while it pushes it. So back down here at the tail is the task, and the task is measured in those hours. And if, again, the story is here, for ABC, that we've got to do some site research, the task is I've got to go ahead and do 2 hours of Google searching research to find some key places where I know people from our market like to hang out, either at lunch or after work for drinks. So that's 2 to 3 hours of research. Then I've got to drive around and actually check those sites and see if they're going to be practical to my purposes. I'm going to plan 6 hours for that. Now, tasks should not exceed what? They shouldn't exceed 8 hours. Frankly, they shouldn't exceed 7, right? At best, 6, I think, is optimal because we only have 6 effective hours in a day. We'll come back to that because now is the time to talk about it. But here, a task shouldn't exceed its boundary, right? Shouldn't be shorter, shouldn't be longer. 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 If it is, it belongs here. 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 5 layers. You try and keep it clean. You try and keep it clean in your organization. If you add more layers in, and you can, that specificity, you need to understand, is it necessary? Does it fall in lean principles? Is it really required to be there? Or is this bloat starting to come into the organization? So, task never exceeds a day. Whatever you define optimal daytime to be, not daytime as in, you know, but 6 to 8 hours. 6 to 7 hours. European, 4 hours. Yay! Anyway, so this is the lowest level, and I talked a bit about how we plan at the lowest level in, achieving organizational objectivity. And when we talk about planning at the lowest level, it is this. And now I'm going to start getting into this. So planning at the lowest level is simply, what did I do yesterday? What did I complete? Right? What did I do yesterday? Did I complete anything? What am I doing today? Am I blocked? So what did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And am I blocked from getting anything done? I don't care about tomorrow. And I'm going to report on the successes from yesterday or anything that's blocking me from being successful today or possibly tomorrow. That's it. That's it. That's all I care about. My scope is the bottom of that. So let's just put that in there. So when the circle shows up, it's not really going to be an onion. It's going to be more like a coffee filter. But I think we just need to understand that that funnel exists. And I'll do that as a dotted line, perhaps. And I know I'm blocking the hell out of the camera. I can't help it. It's just the nature of my mini studio on a desk. So we see that funnel once again. So now we see over here it's state mapping, because when we're planning in each one of these levels, visionary, roadmap, delivery, sprint, or daily, there is a different set of states we talk about. Now, what are states? All right, good question. I know, thank you. And Decker would kill me for saying good question, but it was my question, and I don't have an audience to really kind of say, oh, well, I didn't have a good question. So remember that if you're ever going to speak in public, all questions are good questions. So thank you for the question. Let me go ahead and answer the question. Anyway, when I look at this, we then have to understand these states. What are states? It's the way in which this body of work that we assign to these different layers of time move through the process by which they go from an idea to being delivered to either the next step down. That vision goes down to here to be decomposed into strategic roadmap components, which then goes down to here, which gets decomposed into feature delivery components, which then come down to here that get decomposed into stories for delivery, and then goes down to here for the tasks for delivery. So each one of these layers has a different set of steps that it goes through to get to the next step. So what are those? Those are, well, there's one. There's three base states. Another big three that I didn't put in the video, but there are three base states. And you notice I've got a D down here, D, 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 and I put a bunch of Ds down here to say it can be split. These three base states can be split into multiple meanings and values of states. So if I have three base states, and those three base states are, I have defined a body of work. So here I have a story that I need to go research Google. So as a member of the Agile Boutique Consulting LLC team, I will use Google to research. I kind of got tied up in how well I did that part, right? Anyway, as a member of the marketing team of the Agile Boutique Company, I need to find 3 sites for a guerrilla marketing event so that we can display our excellence in public and garner clientele and leads. So it's a clear definition of what you're trying to accomplish. And at story level, that's kind of the focus. And at story level, you've just defined what you want to do. So that's the first one, D, defined, right? So there's the second state, doing. So now that I've defined it, the moment I sit down and I start typing into Google, where I find Agilists hanging out, and meetups and such, I'm now actually in doing. Defined, doing. When I get done with my 3 to 5, top spots that I'm going to go check out, I am done. Defined, doing, done. Defined, doing, done. 3 base states. We all go through it. I have defined what I'm going to do. I am doing what I said I was going to do. I am done with what I was going to do. And that happens at all levels. But how we approach it is different. At the lowest level of the task, that's pretty much it. Those are the 3. Those are like the common 3. Defined, doing, done. Now, people can put them in a lot of different things. Not started, started, completed, right? It doesn't matter what you call them, but whatever those words are, those 3 words mean the same thing. It's defined but not yet started. I'm doing it because it's been defined and I can now start it. I'm done doing it. That's it. So this is state mapping. And this is one of the most confusing pieces of aligning an organization, is understanding, first of all, the time frames by which they're trying to execute and what they call those things. And you saw how long it took me to just call it a delivery, right? I went through like many cycles just to get there. Think about a large scale organization that may have 5 different terms for what they do in here. I want you to think about it this way. State mapping, all right, building that common lexicon or that common language is what we all struggle with. It's all about context, right? If I can understand what it is that you're trying to do and the means by which you're trying to do it, then I can best help you from my body of experience. But if 5 people walk into a room and in that room is a table and a chair, and all 5 people point at it and say something completely different. So I walk in and I go, table and chair. And the next person walks in and goes, oh, bahuka tehim. I can make a reasonable assumption. They might be saying table and chair, but I don't know in what order. And I don't know what they might imply the use of that is, right? I can assume, but that's from my frame of reference, and that's dangerous in this kind of in situation because I can't literally say my experience is theirs. So next person walks in and they go, he's the Baduy guy. All right, fine. So I've got a habotzi and a he's a bahubade. And then another one comes in, it's a and so it goes. Until finally one of us just grabs it, sits down, pulls it under, and then we all go, ah! So then I walk forward and I grab the chair and I go, chair. And the next one comes up and he goes, hazingus. And the next one comes up and he goes, babuya. And the next one comes up and he goes, hababababab. And now we all know that's a chair and we sit in it. But the 4th guy comes up and he goes, Uskagi, na 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 na, and sticks it against the wall and it falls. And we all go, no, you don't fit in that scheme. Why did you come? So now we find out where something is out of alignment in the organization because we need to get alignment in the organization by trying to understand what we're doing at each one of these time layers. And this is where the confusion always comes in. It's just a term. I discovered this when I started working with high-end databases. Sophisticated databases at QuickPen. That database handled thousands of different piping materials, thousands of different ways of connecting those piping materials under different type of system requirements. Very, very sophisticated, very, very complex, and very difficult to understand how to align it because it had to work in a particular way. And that was the same thing. It was state mapping. And what I realized was the term by which you're operating really doesn't matter in a database. It's the function of the database that matters. How is it connected? How does it understand itself and its relationship to that data? And if I can understand that, then any term I put in there doesn't matter. And so this is understanding the database of how we do planning, right? If I understand how I'm coordinating and what those key values are at each layer, then I know how it's all connected intrinsically, and then I know how that planning is best aligned to be executed in a way that's valuable to everyone at every layer. But this is where it's always confusing. So when I showed that other image in the achieving organizational objectivity, that very weird kind of, truncated pyramid and then funnel and then hard line is another way of mapping that, which is simply to say, what am I doing over this period of time? Just write down all the different names you call it. Once you collect all the names in there, then you just get a group of people together to go, can we all agree that instead of all of us calling it umptifats and freebaham and himahe and dropa yopa yopa, whatever it might be, can we all agree on a brand new term called an axle bow? Oh yes, axle bow, fantastic. From now on, anything that goes on in this layer is an axle bow. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody outside the organization, as long as we can all agree that it's there to serve the same purpose. All right, so this is very similar in nature as saying, how do I then understand the various ways we can split up defined? I can define things a lot of different ways. I can simply say that this is a mug. But that doesn't fully define what's going on with this mug in this period of time. This is a mug, 2/3 full with, at this point, lukewarm tea. And there are 2 tea bags that bring about a concoction of flavor that I enjoy. So that's a far more clear definition of this mug. So I can take defined and I can really just harsh it out. And when we talk about these layers, that's really what we're talking about, is a whole bunch of defined stuff, but there are actions that have to go behind it. So as we go up, we're going to have fun in discovering what these things are. All right, so in here, down at the daily level, right, quite simply, all we really have is defined, doing, and done. All right, so this is clearly the beginning state This is clearly the middle state, and this is clearly the end state. All right? Now, for clarity, we probably want to change those 3 Ds to a language that's more appropriate to what we're trying to accomplish. Because if we just keep talking about that, then again, it gets pretty confusing. So maybe it is not started. Maybe it just stays defined. But once it gets going, maybe we call it in progress, which is what a lot of people do. So I'm going to just put an IP in here, in progress, or IP, in progress. Okay? And then done. Well, done's kind of clear. But are we really done? So in Agile software development, there's done, and then there's done. So done is, yes, this body of work is done, but it's not all done. There's an agreement by the team that say all work is done if it meets all testing is complete, integration is clear, clearly demonstrable value for demo purposes, etc. That's the done. All right. So maybe done isn't the best. Maybe we call that accepted. All right. So I've defined what the solution is going to be. I've put the solution in progress, and then I've accepted what was delivered as the solution. So I'm going to put that in there. All right. But now we're starting to see how we can even take these 3 base states and change it just so that we bring in clarity to the body of work that we're trying to do. This is going to get pretty weird. I'm interested in seeing how this turns out. It's the first time I've done this. Another world first, folks. Anyway, you'll start to note my sense of humor is primarily for me. If you happen to laugh, I consider that collateral damage, so thank you very much. So, talked about here, and I talked about how we do planning there. So the next layer up is what? The sprint level, right? Put it right there, it's the sprint level. Make sure I got my green marker because I want to keep these colors coherent. So at the sprint level, we do planning at every 2 to 4 weeks. However, at the sprint level, we're working with stories. Do stories have a different life evolution than tasks, right? So I have to understand the various states, right? Because this affects our planning. I can have an idea for a story. Then I can define that idea more clearly. Then that idea can be put into in progress. So there's in progress again. Then that idea may have to be tested. Maybe I want to put that in there. Or if I want to keep it simple, that story becomes completed. What does complete mean? Complete is the first definition of done. Right? And it hasn't met yet all of the criteria by which it needs to be accepted. Well, wait a minute, Jesse, this is new. You didn't talk about this before. Well, you're right, I didn't. But now it's a story, right? No one is telling anyone else when they've done a task or not, right? No one reviews that work. We're trusting people to do the task. However, the story is maybe a complex body of value that we're trying to deliver. It has to be tested, right, internally by the team to make sure that what they put together is working properly. But then the person who owns that story, so we go back to the rule of 3 in Scrum and the various roles, 3 roles, the product owner, the product owns that story, they've got what they've called acceptance criteria on that story. So if as a user, right, if as the researcher going out to find out, whoever owns that story, the boss of that intern who's out there running around for ABC to get that stuff, when they come back, they've got a body of criteria. What hours are we looking at? Are they open between 5 to 7? Can we get a group discount if we show up? Are they okay with us reserving it for the night and making this a surprise pass just for these people, et cetera, et cetera? What are the additional costs we might inherit? So all these different acceptance criteria, and maybe the cost should be under a certain value. Those are acceptance criteria. So that's what we talk about in there. So complete doesn't mean it's been accepted. Complete means it's done by the first level of done. All the work has been completed. Oh, so that's why we say complete. Yeah, all the work's been completed, not yet accepted by. So I'm going to put A in there. All right. We're going to find out that I'm old. Oh, I hope that hadn't jumped the shark. And now I got to, oh, wonderful. Right off the wall. I don't think it was intended for that, but I'm going to put that A in there. All right. So at the task level, we have defined, in progress, done, at the sprint level, this user story level. So now we're starting to get clear about the definition of, it's not the sprint necessarily, but it's the body of work that's associated to the sprint that we're mapping out, right? But this body of work is progressing against these states in the sprint. So that means this is what we have to measure against in this sprint. There's a lot of value coming out of this mapping right here as we're starting to identify not just the state it goes through, but those things that we're going to mono-measure and where it's at in its progression through those states. So at the next level up, we now have the feature, and I use brown for that, so I'm going to grab brown. So now the feature might be a little bit different, right? Feature, we now start talking about funding. There's money. There's a big body of work that's going to get associated to this. It's going to be maybe 2, 3, 4 Agile teams that could be all contributing work against this, or 2, 3, 4, any whatever team it is in your industry that could be contributing against this. So there's maybe a little, there may be some more process steps it's got to go through before we can actually put it into work. So we're going to say that, again, there's an idea. So we're going to keep the idea thing. That might be the common one here. I mean, all things start as ideas, and everything gets accepted in the end or rejected. So maybe that probably winds up being, why don't we just say that that's what that's always going to be? This is always going to be an idea. Well, no, not necessarily, because maybe this feature's already had its idea, right? We got to remember, where is it coming from? There's 2 ways for work to be brought in, by the way, at the level itself. And it should be rare that that's happening here, and it should be rare that that's happening here, because any ungoverned work not aligned to a high-level strategy is essentially a cancer in the organization. A tumor is now growing. There's development happening that nobody asked for. It's consuming money from the organization, and it's going to go out into the market that nobody asked for, and it's going to have a negative impact. So it's a cancer, and you have to be aware about that. So there should be no injection here. But at this layer, because there's very clear focus about what strategies there are and what we can do to execute it, and what the focus is about, what the responses are coming internally on both ends and externally, they've got probably the clearest picture about the values that are going to be best delivered in that very, very short-term delivery cycle. So here it's a difference, but above it, there's also these larger bodies of work, which we're agreeing for now is called an epic, and that has to be broken down as well. So maybe the idea has been funded, and maybe the idea at this level has been accepted and approved and gone through its cycle, which we'll get to. So when it drops down here, maybe it doesn't drop down in the idea cycle, maybe it does drop down somewhere else. So now we're starting to see where things are starting to connect, right? Because when I take a story and it's in its idea phase, when I define it, what am I building? I'm building the tasks. So I'm building this next layer down. So now we're starting to see this connection. When I know what the idea for the story is, then I can define its tasks, then I can start executing its tasks, put that story in progress. When that story goes in progress, guess what? If it's attached to a feature, that feature goes in progress. Guess what? If that feature is attached to an epic, it goes in progress. If that epic is attached to what we consider at the visionary level strategic themes, not initiative, themes, 3 big honking concepts that we're trying to execute, right? It's connected to that. That's that clear visibility. It's that nervous system. It's the sense and response, so that any thread of development that may be going on at any level, the moment it has an interruption, you can start to address it because you're clear in what your processes are and where you're at in any given phase and how critical that body of work might be given its placement in its backlog. And we'll get into that when we talk more about planning. I haven't even really touched the actual activities of planning, but I will. Trust me, I will. I may need a break in a second because this has been going on for almost an hour at this point. I think that's video 1. I'm going to, now let me finish this and then I'm going to call that video 1, mapping this all. All right, so at the delivery level, we still have the idea state, right? So I think it's safe to say that idea is probably going to be the first state for everything, and except it's going to be the last state for everything. All right, so then we can get into further define. So it's gone through the idea state. Over here, there might be a funnel because it's got to be prioritized, right? So now it goes into the funnel for prioritization. The idea state's been met from level intake itself, right? The idea state's been met from the level above So now it's going in to be funneled into its prioritization. And then once it's in prioritization, or is it? It's going into its funnel, it's going into its prioritization, which means what? It's going to get ready to be scheduled. So if it goes into that, that means scheduling, not yet, all right? So is it? Do we want scheduling in there? No, you know what? It goes in progress because the funnel is priority. So now we go IP, and it might be, no, that's going to change. So this goes in, oh, you know what we could call it actually is build. That's what we call it here. We start building the feature. It's not in progress. We're building it. So idea, funnel, we go into build, and then over here we review it, and then we accept it. So maybe it's review and accept, or it could be something else. Now, SAFE's got a very clear funnel set for a lot of different, what we call value streams. What does that mean? Well, it's the values that we believe we're delivering at different layers of the organization and the time frames in which we're executing on them. So if we think about it from that perspective, these are kind of value streams. How do I move that thing through the various states by which I'm delivering that value? So the next level up is the roadmap. Now the next level up, a little bit more robust, right? Now we're talking about big ponderous things. There's a lot of money involved, a lot of time and effort is going to be involved in that. So we still have the original idea, but there might be, a review. There might be a justification set. There might be some preliminary work, right? So we're starting to see there may not be even enough specification in here. But then, in here, it's probably going into the same state, build. And then the last one is it not accepted? Because, here we accepted this. This is something else. We're analyzing, right? We're measuring. We're measuring the value of that delivery, right? Not that delivery, but we're measuring the value, the overall value, the collected value of these smaller deliveries. I should have wrote this up there because that's confusing me. So I'll get these out of here, and then I'm going to finish this off so I can put this on pause and I can take that break. But anyway, we've got the idea, and then we've got, what did I call it? Justification, a business case, or a review, justification review, and then we go into building, and then we measure, all right? And then we can confirm or deny success, or we can put, we could say it was valuable, all right? Valuable. And then at the visionary level, it can be even more, right? We can break it down even further. And I'll be quite honest here, it may just be, I had an idea, I'm measuring it, I'm doing it and measuring it as I'm doing it, and then it's done, and I'm measuring it while it's done. Was it valuable or not? But again, I have an idea, the great big aha, and if I'm thinking at this visionary level, I've got to run that idea, by quite a few people before they even say, hey, thumbs up, because we're talking about significant years of investment of the annual budgets, right, in these efforts. So, there's the initial idea, there's, maybe we call it quantifying the value of the idea, there's the various justifications and business cases that we're writing for it, and then it goes through its review process, and then it gets confirmed, and then it goes into build, and then we're validating, we're measuring, we're reviewing, and then we're finally agreeing that, hey, that was all worth it, all right? So now we're starting to see, I've got this very clear map, but it's all one thing. All of this has been defined, all of this is doing, all of this has been completed, and all of this is really just saying, yeah, I agree that you've done what we've said we were going to do, or that it has the value that we said we were going to have. So I never even got into draw the circles to show you the planning onion. So real quick, before I finish this whole thing, at the highest level, there's the first circle. And you got at the daily level. Then you got at the sprint level. And this is a horrible representation. I'll do a much cleaner one, I promise. In the decks. Oh, no, I've gone too far. Much, much too far for that one. Right there. And then right there. So that's the planning onion. That's the funnel by which everything is brought in. This is how we start to organize everything and understand the various states it's going to transition through for its various delivery time frames. I haven't even gotten into the balanced agile planning intake and delivery cycles. That I'm starting to realize is a bit more, but this is the basis of planning, right? And yeah. All right. Again, you want to have any conversations around this, please let me know. You want any copies of the decking material that I put in here, please let me know. This is Jesse Perlman. This has been about the basics of Agile planning, if you believe it or not.